Dave, nobody thinks we got the balls to pull this podcast off. What's up? You're listening to Nowstalgia Pod. We're giving you your weekly look what's going on in pop culture. I'm here with my co-host Dave Martinson. Dave, we're going to be talking Widows, if no one got that reference at the drop. We're also going to be talking Fantastic Beasts, Anderson Paak, and a couple of other awesome movies and some okay albums today. But before we jump into it, if you're listening and you support the podcast, please hit that subscribe on YouTube, soundcloud.com/nowtunes, or wherever you're getting this podcast, and also share us with a friend. We appreciate any support and any feedback you give us. We want to grow, so help us with that. Jumping right into it. Little Mix. Little Mix. So interestingly enough, did you ever watch The X Factor?
Fuck no. Come on, dog. If there's one thing that is so played into ground, it's watching people sing and like become champions at that. Like, I'm just so over it. And it's like talent shows. I'm all about talent shows if you exclude singing and dancing and do other talents, you know? But so that's not what people like.
So you would be into like America's Got Talent because a comedian wins almost every single year, or a magician. It's like one of those two.
Yeah, that. Yeah, exactly. Like,
okay. Yeah. So X Factor in 2011, they brought
X Factor. Right.
Yeah, UK X Factor. Simon Cowell pretty much brought this band together, Little Mix, and they dropped their fifth album this past weekend called LM5. Very creative name, obviously. It's interesting because I was doing a little bit of research about them. I hadn't really heard much about this group. They're pretty enormous over in the UK. Like their last album in 2016, Glory Days, was on the top 40 charts for like almost 90 weeks. It's pretty absurd. I mean, that's basically since it's been put out, it's been a top 40 album. And it seems like a couple of their singles off that album have really propelled it to stay on the list. So I'm wondering, why haven't I heard of this group? And maybe listening to this album told me a little bit about it. There wasn't really anything that stood out to me about this album, anything that really caught my attention. It seemed very like paint by numbers pop album for the time. The way you pitched this group to me was they're kind of like, what was the band that you used?
Fifth Harmony.
Yeah, you're like the UK version of Fifth Harmony. Fifth Harmony blows these guys out of the water in my book. I find them so much more interesting, and their vocals so much more interesting, especially. What did you think of this Little Mix album and just them as a group in general?
Yeah, well, I think that's how they came into my orbit a few years ago. Was just I was reading something about Fifth Harmony, a US-based pop quintet that was put together via a singing reality competition. And the piece was constructed something along the lines, Fifth Harmony, but do you know Little Mix? They're very similar. You probably like them too, something like that. And I think the reason they didn't make as much inroads in the US, at least until recently, is partially because of Fifth Harmony's dominance at the time. They've since split up and have gone solo. So I think that space of girl group, pop group, they're in the same lane, so they were just kind of occupying their own sides of the Atlantic, I guess. And also, you spoke to it, the sounds of Fifth Harmony. I think there's unique sounds. Everyone knows Camila Cabello. Normani is also popping off, right? And you can easily identify that. And I don't think for Little Mix, at least not yet, we have quite that like singular vocals that you can like pick out. And ultimately, it is lazy just to compare them just to Fifth Harmony, But if we're just thinking about them in broadly pop music, thinking like the pop records we've talked about this year, Robin recently, Ariana Grande, Camilla, I think, like you said, Little Mix is more, I don't want to say generic, but doesn't stand out from the pack as much as those other records did earlier in the year. And I think that's probably what's hurt them with branching out beyond their big UK base, which is established and, like you said, very successful. I think they've had their moments. Songs like Black Magic, I think, is really good. But I didn't really have that many songs jump out at me on LM5. And I think some of these will inevitably do big streaming numbers, like pop groups usually do. I don't know if this would do much to grow their base over here. I mean, the lead single was with Nicki Minaj. Obviously, that's a play for the States, but I think that song's fine. I don't know how successful it'll be, but I mean, what was your read as someone who, you know, is familiar with Fifth Harmony and has listened to plenty of pop this year? I mean, did you really see anything that could pop out to you?
The thing I think that stood out most to me was how much they seem to be trying to find a hit that will really catch on in America. Like Wasabi, or what was the other one that sounded like Wasabi? Oh, Stripper. Like those two songs sound very almost like Migos influence or like hip hop influence, where they're trying
Radio
almost like
plays, for
rapping.
sure.
Yeah, and they're going with a very specific sound. They had Love a Girl Right, which kind of infused this like Latin, almost like Carlos Santana mixed with like Rob Thomas type sound to it, and it's not smooth. I'll put it that way. It's just like they were like, we're gonna put out this type of song or this type of song and see which one really like caught, and it just left me feeling like they didn't really have an identity that they feel comfortable with, that they're trying to like, almost kind of like the conversation we were having with underachievers, where they're trying to find whatever will propel them to that next level, and for them it's the next level here in the United States. Which I don't knock the hustle, but I would much rather hear something like, another Black Magic, not the same thing obviously, but evolving in that sound rather than just trying to find whatever will catch on here. Be true to yourself, I guess, is like the main thing. Although I gotta say, The Cure, very catchy song that definitely stuck with me. If I had to pick one song off the album, that'd be the one I come back to. Any that really hit for you?
I thought Joan of Arc was interesting. There's a few moments here on this album, the song with Nicki as well, where like there's female empowerment themes, feminist themes in general. But ultimately, I feel like a lot of times they're pretty surface level, and it's like they're not actually saying as much as you think when you first start listening to it. So again, those are songs that I probably wouldn't go back to as much. But yeah, I think you hit it. Like there are songs on here that are just straight up catchy. It's catchy pop music. And, there's a science to it in a certain degree. Right? I think Ed Sheeran actually wrote a song or two on this as well.
Yeah.
So they'll be fine off this against their fifth album. They're going to do big numbers. But like you said, I don't know if there was much artistic ambition on LM5, unfortunately.
Well, someone that seems to have a little bit more artistic ambition, Kirk Knight from Joey Badass's hip hop collective Pro Era. It's a very Wikipedia line right there. So I don't even know. Is this album IWII? Like how do I pronounce it?
I'm not actually sure, to be honest. It's funny. He's kind of played with conventions before, because last year he released the Nick at Night project with Nick Caution, another Pro Era member, and Nick Caution spelled NYCK, so they spell it differently. So like he likes to play with those phonetics, I guess. But yeah, I'm not actually sure how you say it. But this new tape just dropped from Kirk Knight. And was this your first exposure to his solo material? I mean, you've heard his features and his production on Joey's work before, but like, did you ever listen to any of his solo stuff before?
Actually, when I was clicking through a couple of his bigger hits, and there was one that I think I had heard before. Let me just pull it up here in my Spotify. The thing about him, I think, when I was listening was this was a very inconsistent record for me. Like there were some songs that really stood out, and I was like, oh, there's something here. This is really awesome. Then there were songs I was like, not so sure about that one. Also, it was I Know featuring Mick Jenkins. I think I had heard that one before somehow. Maybe it was like a Rap Caviar song or something like that at some point. I'm not sure. But yeah, so like when I think about this record and I think about the songs on it that really stood out to me, like a song like, just had it here, like Leverage or MO. I felt like when it would like that song would end, and then the next song I would be like, I'm not really into this. Then the next song I'd be like, oh, there's something here. And then the next song, not so much. And I felt like that's kind of how it was throughout the record. Like it would pull me in, and then I'd be sucked back out pretty quickly. What did you think? It sounds like you're way more familiar with him than I am, though.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because he's not the first solo artist to pop off from PE. I mean, it started with the late Capital Steez and Joey, obviously. Then like CJ Fly started making some music. Nick Caution, as I just mentioned. Then Kirk Knight originally was just a producer in PE, and then he put out Late Night Special in 2016, and that's an album that's actually quite different than this one, where it's very similar, and it almost was like he didn't quite have enough personality on that tape. It's still competent flows, competent rhyming, and with that New York sound, it sounds like someone who's in Joey's orbit, but it just didn't quite land. And then you have this one, like you said, I think he tries so many different things on this, only 35-minute tape. And whether that's singing hooks or just like weird deliveries, and then he goes back into more of his like boom bap inspired normal flows, right? Like, track to track, it's not cohesive. He's just jumping all over the place doing these things. And on one hand, I respect it because he's clearly trying to grow as an artist. And I think following up last year's Nick and Night, which just hit really hard and was more boom bap inspired, having this come out where he's showing a bunch of different things, I think is cool. But there are songs on here that I think just stink, like Tom Clancy, Downtime, and TML. I thought that was a very weak sequence. But earlier songs like Duffel Bag and Different Day, I thought were dope, and Run It Back Freestyle, very classic PE sound. So he's a talented dude. He's been making beats even longer than rapping. So I think this is almost like a cool introduction to him for people, just because again, there's a lot here and not all good. But I'm gonna keep watching out for Kirk and what he does, within and outside of PE. But definitely wasn't expecting all the different lane shifts on the short mixtape. That's for sure.
Yeah, Run It Back Freestyle is probably the one that stood out most, just because he goes so hard on that track. I was like, oh, went like immediately on my run playlist. Something I'm definitely going to be coming back to. And if you want to catch the songs that we're talking about on these two albums, as well as the upcoming one, Oxnard, please check out our Nowstalgia Best of 2018 playlist on Spotify and give us a follow on there as well. Yes, Lo! Time for our guy, Anderson Paak, album number 3. His solo album number 3, I should say.
Correct.
So Venice, Malibu, and now Oxnard. Anderson Paak, I mean, we reviewed Malibu. I maybe you did solo. I can't remember when we first started up, right?
Well, that came out January 2016, like right before we started the podcast. So we didn't, I don't think we really talked about it until we did end of year. I know I had it number 3, my album to 2016. I don't think we talked about Yes Law, his project with Knowledge, the producer, as well. So this is really the first project we're talking about as it's come out from him. Given that post Malibu, he got a song in an Apple commercial, toured with Bruno Mars, and then went away for a little bit. So this is really the first time we've had a chance to really talk about him in the moment.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy because I feel like we obviously have actors, musicians that we highlight a lot on here and we ride for. I feel like between us both, since you turned me on to him back in 2016, Paak's been one of our favorites, one of the people we've been most excited for, most anticipating his album this year. And it's finally here, Oxnard. What's your take on it, Dave? Good album, bad album?
Yeah, I really, really like it. I think it might be my album of the year right now.
Ooh.
Obviously, that's a tentative statement. Don't hold me to that yet. I'll put it in stone in a month. But it's funny because Malibu, I think, is probably a better record than Oxnard. And I had Malibu number 3 in 2016, but that's really just because Malibu came out in the year that Kanye and Chance also made music. Not really slayed against Anderson.
And really good album, too.
Right. And Oxnard, it's funny because I was reading some reviews, and it's funny where I feel like I'm one of the few people that's like, this is capital G great. And most people are like, oh, no, this is lowercase g good. There's some issues. And I'm like, yeah, there's some issues, but I still think what works here works so well that it's like, I mean, how can you hate? So I really like the project, but what did you think?
I liked it a lot. I'm not putting it as my album of the year. I think that Janelle Monáe is still holding that crown for me, but the thing about this album for me is there are definitely some songs that I found myself not going back to so much, but there's so much, especially on the back half of this album, that I found myself coming back to constantly throughout the weekend and just thinking about a lot. I mean, the features alone on this and how Pac was able to pull, I mean, great features out of Kendrick, Q-Tip, Cole, who sounded amazing, Snoop Dogg, who I don't know where this verse came from, but if Snoop Dogg could replicate this all the time, he would be relevant constantly. I mean, he's obviously still such a huge name, but just the level he got to on this is unbelievable. And then BJ, the Chicago kid, also delivered on his. So, I obviously really liked it. It's going to be in my top 10 for sure, probably top 5. But you talked about the things that you felt worked really well. What were those things that stood out most to you?
Yeah, I think what it makes Anderson so interesting, I mean, ever since he popped up on Compton, Dr. Dre's last album in 2015, he had 6 features on, and that's really where damn near everyone first heard of him, right? It was obviously a big look for him, and then obviously Dre helped him make Oxnard, and he's featured on here as well. And ever since that point, and then obviously Malibu, Venice, right, all that, Anderson's always stood out because he can do so many different things. I mean, he was an XXL freshman, but it's really hard to just call him a rapper, right? He obviously raps and he brings soulful and funky stylings to rap, but you know, he also has like an amazing ear for drums. And this is all within this, you know, uniquely raspy voice. So he's such a unique vocalist that does so many different things, all while having an ear for multiple genres almost all the time, right? I wouldn't call any of his project rap albums, even though he raps on lots of his projects. The majority of the time he is in fact rapping, right? And I think that's what's just so cool about him, because he's so unique. And it's like, yeah, we can find parallels to Kendrick and Chance if you want to find them, but I feel like he ultimately is his own guy. And I think he made songs on Oxnard that, you know, can stand up with his other big smashes and the songs that really sound like this quintessential Anderson Paak songs. Now, while I don't think there is something as high and great as probably Come Down from Malibu, I don't think we have that here. I think when we do have, you know, songs like Six Summers and Savior's Road, and then even some of the songs that are heavy in the features, like My Brother's Keeper, I think these are dynamite songs. And, you know, I think they'll go into his, you know, single canon. So and then, I mean, almost all the songs I really dug, and I've been going back to a lot of them. I think Who Are You, a song that is probably the most rapidy he's ever been. You know, and maybe that sacrificed a little personality in the process, but, you know, like he ultimately across the album, he doesn't really change who he was. You know, he's still a guy who likes to rap about the way he likes ladies, right? Like he's very hedonistic, almost misogynistic guy in a certain sense, but because he comes at it in a unique way, it's like not only tolerable, but it's almost always amusing, you know? So I thought this was like incredibly on brand for Anderson. And like I said, I think there's several songs that will be lofty on his, you know, top songs lists for sure. So yeah,
Totally.
It's tough to find a lot to dislike on here.
Yeah, and I think where a big critique of this album is that people feel like it's overly ambitious at points, and it makes it hard to deliver on all of it, which I think I can see that, you know, like for example, was it the song Smile Petty, which is basically his political song. Is that it's his political song? For me, it kind of hit, kind of didn't. I think it's catchy, and I think that there's some really good moments on that track, but overall it kind of felt like a shift away from the personality he's come to be known as, which is also probably something that he's trying to grow, is that his personality is not just this, you know, like goofy, like you said, hedonistic character. He's a complex human being with complex thoughts who exists in our world. So he's obviously going to have opinions on these things. I think when he's at his best is when he is light and funny, though, like a song like Sweet Chicks, which is probably like the least serious song on this whole album. Really, I found myself coming back to just because it was a lot of fun, and I found it incredibly funny, especially how it kind of ends with the girl being upset with him and I guess shooting him or at least shooting at him. But just how the way he kind of transitions from all of it. I mean, it's just really fun to listen to, and he does it like you said over this shifting genre bending music that is funky and dancey and hip hop infused and even like disco at times. Like Tints, I feel like you could put that with the like those people doing like the disco dancing back in the 70s. Like make that a music video right now. It's like perfect for it. So I mean, there's a lot to like on here. You mentioned the features, which, and I was talking about them too. Which ones were you most impressed by, and which ones were you like, could probably done without that?
I think J. Cole's feature is really great. He's actually been on an impressive feature run this year, on top of KOD coming out. So I really liked him on Trippy. And then probably Q-Tip on Cheers. Q-Tip is interesting because you could definitely see him as an influence for Anderson, both the Tribe sound and both Q-Tip specifically as a vocalist, as a curator of sounds. And not only that, Q-Tip actually really brought it with the feature. So I think that's a really cool pairing that works really well. And then, I think Dre, it's Dr. Dre's old. I don't kind of hate on him too much for it, but
his delivery is just so strange now. He keeps it so like.
I saw it described as militaristic, and I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. He loves to go to the gym now too. And then Pusha T, I think I really like Push's in fitting with the theme of the song. I really liked his comments about Malice, talking about clips and stuff. That was cool. And then the Kendrick feature, I think ultimately is like a disposable Kendrick feature, but it fits the song really well. And I was like, this actually technically it's the lead single from this because Bubblin' isn't on Oxnard, but I think that was still good. So yeah, there wasn't any features I disliked. I thought BJ Chicago Kid again was really good on Sweet Chick. He's always really good. Kind of reminded me of the song The Dreamer at the end of Malibu. Yeah, so I think it's I think The Chase and Headlow, the first two songs, I probably find those songs more the least memorable ones, but like you said, once you get into the middle and back half of this album, it just really doesn't stop.
Yeah, it hits a groove and it just kind of, you just ride with it. Just one thing I did want to highlight in that in Sweet Chick, he does give a Gautier reference, which I mean, any rapper that's mixing in a Gautier line, I mean, I'm here for it. So, Anderson Paak, Oxnard, certified fresh by Nowstalgia Pod. Definitely check it out. We'll have a couple of songs on our playlist again, so please follow that and tell all your friends about Anderson Paak. He's probably one of the most underrated performers out there right now for the quality he's putting out consistently. Also I loved how he shouted out Mac in one of the songs.
Absolutely.
Which obviously he released Dang with Mac or featured on Mac's album. So definitely still a loss. Mac is still a loss that I think a lot of the music industry is feeling pretty heavily. Wrapping it up there for music today. We got 3 pretty big time movies to talk about. Why don't we start with the Coen Brothers dropping a Netflix movie? What am I supposed to make of this, Dave? The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. This feels like probably the best made for Netflix movie that I can recall. I mean, I haven't seen Roma yet, so I'll withhold my judgment on that until that comes out. The trailer looks incredible. But I mean, it almost like takes what Netflix is. So a lot of people just binge watching TV shows. And it's like, all right, so we're going to put this on a format where people binge watch. Here's like 6 different stories, and we'll just let people binge watch these all in one sitting.
Yeah, it's Netflix's whole plans this year with Ballad of Buster Scruggs, with Roma, with they're releasing these films in small limited releases in theaters, which is going directly against their ethos they were ascribing to as early as the beginning of the year, right? And I think part of that is because the Coen Brothers, Alfonso Cuarón, are 2 of the most influential, successful filmmakers we have right now, so they probably have some pull with putting a project on Netflix. But I think it also speaks a little bit to the changing of the times, both the way Netflix's worldview and also the way people are accepting Netflix. in terms of the traditional industry. But yeah, I mean, is this the best made for Netflix movie they have? It, I think it is until Roma comes out.
Yeah.
I mean, what's in the competition? Private Life came out earlier this year. It's supposed to be great. Okja maybe.
Okja's pretty good.
There's only a handful that are like truly great. There's other movies that are just good. Like your War Machines, your Meyerowitz stories, stuff like that. But yeah, I think that's an interesting title to bestow on Scruggs for a few weeks until Roma comes out. But it's interesting just because the whole genesis of this project was initially described to us as like an anthology series being on Netflix, and the Coens said like last week that they were never going to do this as a TV series because they don't like doing TV because it's too open ended. And I'm like, why didn't they tell us that 2 years ago?
Right.
I didn't know that's how they felt. So I don't really know if that's ultimately 100% true, but that's what they said. And I thought it was interesting that they would do, these 6 stories that are totally unconnected, but thematically, all in line together. And and throughout the way, it has a lot of the things that the Coen brothers are known for, whether it's, it's like punchy dialogue that is surprisingly funny at like weird moments, and, quirky characters. I think a lot of and then heady, bigger themes on top of everything. I think this is a lot of what the Coen brothers do best, and it's definitely not their best movie. That's a high bar to hit, but I was quite impressed. Honestly, I really liked it.
Yeah, I thought it was good, and I could tell. I mean, it's Coen Brothers. It's top of the top, like you said, two of the most influential directors we have. I didn't find myself loving this, and I think where I felt like I wasn't really catching for me was because it's 6 different stories. I found myself connecting with some over others, and with it being short, that's fine. Like I'll watch a 25 minute episode and be like, okay, well, no skin off my back there. But it just ended up like almost similar to Kirk Knight, bringing me in and out. Like the what's it called? Near Algodones.
Right.
Definitely didn't pronounce
James
that right.
Franco.
Yeah, with Franco. I didn't find myself that interested in that one. Then we get to Meal Ticket and All Gold Canyon, and those ones really hit for me, and those ones really pulled me in. Especially All Gold Canyon. Shout out Tom Waits. He was incredible awesome in that one. Yeah, he was probably the standout performer in all of this for me. And it really just was kind of feeling up and down, which I guess is how you connect with the story and what feels personal to you. And it's fine, but for Coen Brothers, it did leave me feeling a little bit disappointed, and a little bit like, I don't know if this is. I think it was not what I expected either, which probably was a knock for me as well.
Sure, and I mean, yeah, I think to totally like buy in, I mean, you have to kind of just accept for like what is like their message. And again, it's tough to ascribe like a message to Coens. Obviously, that it's always been tough to pin them down. But I mean, what is it in this one? Like the finding brevity or not brevity, levity in death. Is that really what the theme is? I'm not sure. Death was definitely a theme throughout, and this was, and they're making light of it at all turns, whether it starts off with the Ballad of Buster Scruggs proper or Near Algodones, like you said. I think that might be one of the weaker ones, but also it's the shortest one, so it doesn't really overstay its welcome. And then The Mortal Remains, the very last one, The Stagecoach, that was probably my least favorite story, but that was really more of like a conclusion story, and they're just kind of like hashing it out for the viewer, the themes, I guess, and like I'll watch Brendan Gleeson chew scenery anyway. That's fine with me. But yeah, I thought my favorite ones were Meal Ticket, All Gold Canyon, and the Gal Who Got Rattled, I think.
Yeah, the Gal Who Got Rattled. It's funny because they had moments in this, like the shootout with the Indians or the Native Americans in this, when I was just like, yeah, they're really good at this. Like this is like reminded me a lot of like No Country for Old Men, like some of those scenes. It just they really do what they do well. But I think to what you were saying before, if we can't really find the overarching storyline or the overarching point in all this, it almost feels like there's something that didn't come across probably the way that they intended it to, or maybe they're expecting people to take from it what they want. But I did leave a lot of these feeling like I don't really know if I got what they were trying to say there, and I think that for me that detracts a bit from it. Overall, it's a Netflix movie, and like I said, if I can watch something at home, I'm going to give it some extra points for me, like make it as available to me as possible. So I think that this will, probably like a 70, 75. I was wondering where it fell for you in your Coen Brothers like rankings, if you have them, or if you have like ones that you like and ones that you dislike.
Yeah, no, so that's a good question. I think the Coen Brothers, they're largely discussed in terms of early Coen Brothers and then contemporary Coen Brothers, and I guess now we're really in late Coen Brothers. But I'm not super well versed in the early stuff, unfortunately. I haven't seen Miller's Crossing. I haven't seen Barton Fink. Really want to watch that movie at some point. But obviously, this movie doesn't compare to Fargo or Big Lebowski. Doesn't compare to No Country for Old Men. Now, No Country for Old Men, True Grit, and Ballad of Buster Scruggs, those are their three westerns, right? But they're all very different films. But in terms of I think I'd probably have this. I have this above Hail Caesar. I'd say. Hail Caesar. About Lewin, quite enjoyable, quite funny. I liked, but honestly, the biggest takeaway, of course, is the Alden Ehrenreich scene from that movie. I think I like Inside Llewyn Davis more. That's an interesting one because that's a movie that wasn't quite what I expected when I saw it. You kind of had to set that's a story about, just missing out, like pseudo failure, right? I haven't seen Burn After Reading since I saw it in theaters, so I don't have a good opinion on that, and I haven't seen A Serious Man, so I don't know. It's tough because it's a high bar, like I haven't seen any. I haven't seen all of them, but the ones I don't dislike any of their movies that I've seen. So, but yeah, I have it above Hail Caesar for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think it pretty much falls probably in like the middle to the back half for most people. Seems like you probably have your Coen favorites, and this isn't going to crack anybody's like top 5, but it's still quality, and it's good. Like the Coen Brothers, kind of like pizza, even when it's not their best, it's still really enjoyable to eat. So definitely check it out because it's not going to cost you anything other than your regular Netflix subscription, which pretty much everybody has at this point anyway. So something that I talked about, a lot of heavy costs, Widows. Steve McQueen's was his 4th movie now, follow up to 12 Years a Slave, which he won the Oscar for Best Picture for. I mean, it's got a star-studded cast led by Viola Davis, Daniel Kaluuya, Liam Neeson. I mean, just to name pretty much by the top 3. I mean, Colin Farrell's in there, Brian Tyree Henry. It's pretty stacked. Yeah. Widows. It's interesting. We were talking before we started recording. I had a very, very lively crowd with me. People that were whooping and hollering and oohing and awing at the twists and turns of this movie. It's billed as a heist movie that is really so much more, but it didn't really do that great in the box office. It's doesn't have it's 92% Rotten Tomatoes with the critics, but if I'm recalling it, I think you mentioned this too. It's not really getting a lot of great reviews with fans. What did you think? I mean, I loved it, but I'm wondering if I was in the minority here.
No, I love this movie. I think Widows is absolutely fantastic. But yeah, it got a B cinema score, or is it a B plus? I forget, which is, in terms of cinema score, that's kind of low. That's like Justice League, that's disappointing. And on top of that, it missed box office estimates. It hit 12 million. That's not a lot. And it's a cheap movie, $40 million budget, but it was underseen and kind of lukewarmly received by audiences, which it's tough for me to wrap my head around, just because I don't know how you can watch Widows and be like, fuck, I didn't love this film. I mean, it's a heist movie that like transcends normal heist movies because it tackles everything else that crime is actually about in real life, which is something you don't get from crime movies almost every single time. It's a movie with women leads, about women, that's not just doing it to be about women. you know?
Mhm.
It just happens to exist and be about women, you know? Like anywhere you look, there's things like we mentioned the cast. There's so many good performances in this movie. And I think it's a generally thrilling ride. And like it makes the story not about the plot itself. It's not about the actual robbing. It's not about the
Mhm.
action. That's all truncated in Act 3, right? It's
Right.
about the storytelling and the grander themes. And I thought it's interesting because Steve McQueen, his first three films are all feature films are all very relentless and very tough to watch more than once because they're very punishing to the characters on screen. And Widows is not that. I think Widows is has slightly funny moments, good action, and tons
Mhm.
of character moments. And it's a nice genre shift for Steve McQueen, but also tonal shift for him too. So I really liked it as a fan of his earlier work. But even if you weren't familiar with him, I think this is an incredibly crowd pleasing film. But clearly that wasn't the case. Kind of
Yeah,
surprising.
it definitely surprises me, and I think, um, when I think about this movie, there's so many things about it that really stand out. Like pretty much everybody gave a really strong performance. It was a really great script, and like I said, there were twists and turns. So even if you're not like you don't really care about like the cinematography or any of that sort of stuff, it's just a fun story and it's a great heist movie. I mean, I was like gripping the edge of my seat when they finally did go in and pull the heist off.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, it's hard for me to, I guess, make sense of why people might not like it, especially because, I mean, Steve McQueen, obviously one of the best I don't even know if you can say up and coming, one of the best directors we have right now. And he lets all these characters and all these actors just ball out. Like, Viola Davis in this, I mean, we already know that she's great. We don't really need to go into why Viola Davis is great, but she has a pretty difficult like lead role because she's dealing with all this grief and all this like confusion and kind of just like on the edge of things the whole time while also having to hold it together and figure out how to pull off a heist when she's never done anything like this before. She's just like piecing life together at that point. You have Cynthia Erivo who like
Irvo.
Irvo comes in like halfway through the movie and just is like this rocket on screen and adds like so much like weight and like badassness. You have Elizabeth Debicki whose character probably has the most growth and probably the most satisfying character arc I'd say throughout. And then on the other side of things you got Brian Tyree Henry and Colin Farrell like showing like going toe to toe like the whole time. It's like how can you like not like what's happening here. And I think maybe it's not that people don't like it, but uh, I think when you have movies like the Crimes of Grindelwald, which we're going to get to, a lot of people probably said, I'm going to go see that this weekend and I'll go see Widows over the Thanksgiving break or something like that.
Right.
I basically just gushed about it. Maybe a good place to start in breaking down what we liked about the movie is McQueen, I think, had a lot of like signature moments in this, but what stood out to you most about his direction, or just his overall like touch on the film?
Yeah, I think you mentioned cinematography. I think it stands out. There's some really nice moments with the camera where Colin Farrell leaves the event in the district, and the camera is not on his conversation in the car. It's just put on the hood of the car. You're just watching him drive from like the
Mhm.
poorer areas in the district to the affluent mansion that he lives in, like 10 minutes away.
Not
And
even like five.
it's right, and it's a really smart way to show the audience and just show the wealth gaps that exist in Chicago. It's an accurate depiction of the gentrification of Chicago and the haves and the have-nots and whatnot. So I think that was effective both in and out of the story. And then the camera also really twirls around Kaluuya a lot when he's doing his menacing
In the gym.
murdering the
Yeah,
basketball scene in the gym most importantly, which is funny. The two guys he killed were the cool kids, the rap duo,
fucking crazy.
James Washington and Michael Rocks. Fucking I didn't quite recognize at first. I was like, I recognize Sir Mikey Rocks. I was like, is it? And then I read about it later. I was like, fuck, I want to watch it again now that I'll be looking for it. But yeah, the way the camera like pans around him, and then or when it'll focus on his face when his goons were doing stuff for him, right?
Yeah.
Smart touches. And the only choice I think he made in this film that I would question, and I don't have as big a problem with it with other people, but I saw it being mentioned, was the flashback scene with Viola Davis and Liam Neeson's son in the car. I think that scene it doesn't flesh out, police violence on black men, black youths that well. And the rest of the movie tackles issues in a smarter way. So it almost is like this was like ham-fisted into the film a little bit. We really need that flashback for Viola Davis's character arc, And then the meta story, Steve McQueen is a British man, and it's almost like here's your commentary on America's problems. So it's like I didn't think it took away from the film, but I do think it was a little sloppier than most of the rest of the film. So I think that's he tripped a little bit with that. But yeah, I think he killed it, and it's he's a director that's not that famous, but he should be.
Absolutely. And I agree with everything you said. The like signature cinematography moments in this are fantastic. I think what I was most impressed with was how him and Gillian Flynn wrote this story that is a heist movie, but it also encompasses politics and racial relationships and undertones. And there's so much that goes into it, and it's written so well and paced so well, where it's able to cover all these things and do it in a way that feels not rushed or like he's not serving all those different parts. I thought that was just incredibly impressive. And I left being like, man, there was so much in that, but they really, I don't think underserved anything. So definitely impressive. The one thing I mean, two moments really stand out to me that I didn't like. Linda, played by Michelle Rodriguez, when she goes to the architect's house, that whole scene and like ending up making be like, what? And I'm sure that's probably just a kind of in terms of like how she's grieving and handling it. Also, not enough Carrie Coon, man. Like you got Carrie Coon. She gets 3 scenes maybe in the whole thing. I want more Carrie Coon in my life. And especially because I want to see more of how things came together with her and Liam Neeson's character in it.
Yeah, I think that definitely could have used some more fleshing out, considering they show you kind of early that Liam didn't die, right? So I would agree with that. I thought Michelle Rodriguez was just a little vague as a character in this. And then Cynthia Erivo was great, right? But it was unfortunately more of a physical performance than anything else, just because you didn't have enough time to do that much else. It doesn't detract from the movie, but just I think those two characters was a little weaker. But Debicki and Davis obviously are dynamite, and Debicki, like you said, she arguably has the most, just because there's so much obvious, tangible change happening to her character. And another thing you mentioned that's in the script is men and women's relationships. I mean, her both reconciling with her now dead husband, and then her taking up the arrangement with Lucas Haas, right? And it's like there's a lot there. And then seeing her come into her own and finessing that mom to buy her Tree Locks,
Eat that hot dog, girl. That was fucking iconic. Iconic.
Yeah. So I think overall it's a movie I would recommend to a lot of people. I thought Colin Farrell was perfectly cast as well. Didn't mind the accent. I thought some people thought it was a little too Irish.
I did mind the accent, man. I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's because I think about him in True Detective so much now that
I don't even remember what it was like in True Detective. So it
wasn't great. I feel like he doesn't do accent work well, but I thought he was still fine in the role. I was going to ask you, because there's a lot of great performances. Who's the MVP of this movie for you?
It's tough because I think Viola Davis has to keep the movie going, keep the movie together. She's probably the most important performance. But taking that away, I would say it's Debicki or Kaluuya in terms of like
Mhm.
pound for pound scenes for me. But it's tough. You could pick a lot of people.
Yeah, I think my MVP is Olivia. She basal mystery. She was fantastic, and she is definitely the better dog over Charlie Cooper from A Star Is Born. So that's not really a debate. Um, now, I think in seriousness, probably for me, it would be Cluya, just because every time he was on the screen, I felt like nervous. I felt intimidated. He really was this amazing villain. He does so much just with his eyes. It's like unbelievable. Like just how he can sit in a chair and just like let his eyes hang, and it like says so much. Um, but Debicki also, you mentioned her character has the most like tangible growth in the movie, but the way that she goes from being this like very timid and meek character to this like badass bitch by the end was just like so cool to watch. um RIP to Bash. I mean, damn dude, they did him dirty. um just to kind of wrap everything up, they left things a little open-ended at the end. Would you want to see a sequel or a prequel to this?
No, hell no. Um, yeah, would I like to see Liam Neeson and John Bernthal's crew? Sure. Would have liked to have seen more than one scene with John Bernthal? Yes, but
Yeah.
and would I like to see Tyree Henry's wrath once he finds out his brother died and he got chipped out of the election and he didn't get his money? Sure,
Mhm.
but that's not what the movie's about. So we don't need that. It's kind of like making
Right.
a Sicario sequel.
Yeah, I agree. I have a feeling we will get one, and it probably won't be Steve McQueen directed, but
Really, because this didn't make any money, so why would they make a sequel?
I think it'll be up for awards probably though.
Yeah, it probably will. It's probably on the Best Picture bubble, Best
This
Director
is gonna
bubble.
have like a good back end to it, just because I think people are going to hear about it at awards time. They're gonna see it's a heist movie with all these characters, and people will end up
Right.
seeing it in February and March. Um, so we'll see. I don't know. I'd like to see a prequel. I mean, like you said, Bernthal getting one scene and having that motorcycle or dirt bike in his like living room. Like I just need to know why he did that. And also he seemed to be doing an accent with it. I want to know like what that was all about. I got questions, but overall, Widows again, certified fresh. Check it out. We really like it, and I have a feeling we're gonna see Viola Davis at the award shows, at least getting nominations, and hopefully McQueen too. But something I don't think is going to be getting many award nominations, at least not in the major categories. Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. David Yates behind the helm again for another Harry Potter universe movie. He's done 6 now because he did 4
He
of
started
the.
with Order of the Phoenix back in '07, and he's done so Order, Prince, Hollows 1 and 2, and now Beasts 1 and 2, and he'll do the last 3 as well, as far as we know. So
Yeah.
he's been doing it for like 11 years. He's their man. He's Warner Brothers guy.
The script was written by J.K. Rowling, the creator of the Harry Potter universe, and this movie is sitting at a crisp 40% on Rotten Tomatoes. It has only like 92 positive reviews, like 140 panned ones. Not a great ratio there. Um, I like this movie a lot more than I liked the first Fantastic Beasts,
Interesting.
which I think when I talked on here, I said I pretty much fucking hated that movie. um, I think I found Newt Scamander to be a character I just did not care about, and the Golden Boy Eddie Redmayne. He gave a fine performance, but I just felt like there wasn't a lot there that I was super intrigued by. This at least left me a lot more intrigued and looking forward to the other movies. And I think what I liked more about this is it's a shift away from Newt, and it's really becoming the Dumbledore story, the Dumbledore backstory. Which, I mean, yes, give me the Dumbledore backstory. However, and this is kind of where I'm going to let you take the ball here. Dumbledore is a very important character to a lot of people because in the Harry Potter books, he was, I mean, the patriarch of things in a sense. And he's the kind of character you really can't fuck up, because if you do, there's going to be a lot of people that are pretty disappointed and unhappy with it. I guess I wonder if you like this movie, is my first question. But second, with it becoming the Dumbledore story, is this the sort of thing where you feel like they're leaving it in a place where this is going in the right direction? Put that.
Yeah, so a lot of meat on that bone.
Yeah, I'll
Let's
let
see.
you chew where you want to.
Yeah, I think the movie stinks. Um,
Oh,
I think it's way worse than the first one,
wow.
and that is because Fantastic Beasts 2, Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, uh, does not stand alone by any stretch of the imagination. This movie does not function except to set a table for Fantastic Beasts 3. And nothing that happens in this movie is as interesting as the cliffhanger you leave at the end.
Mhm.
And I don't think the movie functions as well as the first one. The first one has issues. I don't love the first one, but the first one just has a basic narrative that is easy to comprehend. This movie does not have that. This movie is what, 2 hours and 15 minutes long, yet nothing happens in it that feels consequential at all. You have all this payoff about Credence and Leader of Estrange, played by the Queen Zoe Kravitz,
The
and
Queen.
yet it doesn't land because you truncated that whole story with her. I I think the movie just has so many issues, and it made 13 million less in its opening weekend than Fantastic Beasts 1, and this also Fantastic Beasts 1 had an A cinema score. This one has a B plus. That is a
Mhm.
bad drop in terms of just straight audience polling. And yes, it made 253 million global. It's going to be financially successful. It's not an issue. But I just think that, whether this is all to blame on J.K. Rowling or not, I don't know. But she's getting a lot like George Lucas did with the prequels, where, and I think a lot of this problem is she is the sole person with screenwriting credit for these Fantastic Beasts movies. In terms of Grindelwald, I just don't think the story she wants to tell, which I have no problem with her telling her stories, I just don't think she's the right person to fit that onto a screenplay. A 2 hour film is not 600 pages of a novel,
Mhm.
right? And
True.
I think, we can just go down this. I think, like you said, I think Eddie Redmayne. I do not like Newt as a character. I just find his stat. He's an introverted, meek guy. I just don't
Mhm.
enjoy him. But I think Eddie Redmayne's performance is strong. Doing
Sure.
that, he's a talented actor. Um, I think the best moments for Newt are unfortunately moments that have really nothing to do with the story, right? Like when he's just being his magizoologist self in his amazing magical suitcase, right, taking care of the animals.
Hell yeah.
That shit's cool, right? And it's tender, and it really fleshes out his character and why he is a bastion for Hufflepuffs, right? But
Mhm.
the problem is that
Shout out
everything with
Hufflepuffs.
right, they get too much hate. That being said, I'm not Hufflepuff. Uh, the problem is Newt and the Beasts feel so removed from everything that you're telling us is important about this story. Like,
Mhm.
if you just wanted to tell the Dumbledore story, do we really need to make the crutch the Beasts? Because unfortunately, I felt like the Beasts were a crutch in this movie. Every time they came up, apart from inside his magical case in the beginning, I just felt like they were slowing us down and detracting us from the movie. They were just like, all right,
Interesting.
here's our special effects scene. Here's our showiness, right? It slowed us down, and it's
I
like,
actually
what?
feel
Go ahead.
sorry, not to cut you off, but I actually disagree with you on that because when I think about the main moments of it, it was almost like they were just used as like, oh shit, we need to get out of the situation, or we need to do something that's impossible. We're gonna let the creatures do it. Like, they're in the French Ministry of Magic, and there's no way out. So he pulls out. I forgot what the name of that big lion like creature was that like gets them out of the situation. Or oh, they're stuck inside that cell. Oh, good, Pickett will get us out of it. Or
Right.
we need to get that thing on Grindelwald's chest. Like, what is that? And I forgot that other creature. I'm
Yeah,
forgetting all of them.
w-
The duck like one. I know.
Niffler.
Yes, the Niffler.
Yeah.
The Niffler will get it. So like it's almost like, oh, we have no solution for this, so we're just gonna get a creature to do it. Which I don't think that that's a good thing. I just think I don't think they really give the creatures more to do than just be like solutions to problems rather than just.
You know, I think that, like you said, I think the way they use the beasts in terms of like to help Newt solve the stories, I think that's fine. But you kind of said in the beginning where they're just taking the story away from Newt, and I just feel like we've invested too much in his creatures that are sticking around with him, as well as the other ones that are going to come and go, that it just feels hard for Newt and his crew to be involved in the movie going forward, but they're already too far committed. So it just feels like it's forced to me. And we're getting that Dumbledore story, and we can talk about the canonical questions in a second, but
at the end, yeah.
just Dumbledore, Jude Law is great as Dumbledore. I really like that. I like the Hogwarts scenes, the flashbacks and the present scenes. We don't have enough of them, unfortunately. They almost feel like they're in a different part of the universe with this. And on the other side of the coin, we have Grindelwald. And Johnny Depp was revealed to be Grindelwald at the end of Fantastic Beasts 1. And bit of a what's the reveal of Fantastic Beasts 1? Oh, Grindelwald exists. Cool. Kind of knew that.
We knew that.
And this new one, it's just like part of this is Depp just being a bad performer these days. He's very lethargic, very lazy with his line reading, but also just I think he's an uninspired choice to play Grindelwald, who was supposed to be a handsome and charismatic guy, something that Johnny Depp used to be. He's just playing Voldemort light. He's like Voldemort with slightly more nuance, and that is oh, we don't need to kill all the Muggles. They have no mages. They have some purpose to us. It's like, oh wow, you're slightly less extreme. You are you're Mussolini. You're not quite Hitler. Cool. Like he just feels completely underwritten so far. And again, I think that'll change because we're gonna get more of Grindelwald, more of Dumbledore, because we're gonna get more into that unbreakable vow and ultimately the duel they have 13 years from after Crimes of Grindelwald takes place. The problem is that's not in this movie. All that is teased. And what is in this movie, I just think it stinks. Like Credence, I was really tired of Credence as a plot device. I just did not find it interesting until the end. Like nothing mattered to me until the end. And it's just like, what was the point? Yeah. So I was just very disappointed because like Fantastic Beasts 1, it introduced something really cool. And we want to talk canon here. Like they introduced the Obscurial, right? The Obscurus with Credence's character, right? And that was kind of something that was just accepted to be what Ariana Dumbledore's sister, like that was her situation, right? It was kind of vague. We just kind of accept that that's what that is, right? And that's cool and whatnot. But just like where they take that by the end of this movie, it just feels like ultimately the way Crimes of Grindelwald, what we got, both can just confuse or disappoint a casual fan, and just piss off or leave diehard fans very suspect of the future, right? So I just don't think this wins with either party. But I mean, why did you like it more? What did you like of while we got to point B? Like, how did you like that journey?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you make a really good point that if you're a casual fan coming into this, you're gonna kind of be like, okay, like it doesn't, like, even the climax of the movie doesn't really seem to have any sort of real conclusion to it. It's basically just like Grindelwald wants to have people see that the Ministry is really the enemy, or that the government's really the enemy and they should be following him. So he has this big thing together and then has this fire and decides, if you want to come with me, come across the fire. If not, like, I'm just going to kill you. Okay. And then Nicholas Flamel out of nowhere is like, oh, we can save the city and this big fire monster by doing this. I found that to be kind of just like lame and confusing in a sense. But what I liked about it, I think for me was I felt like it was moving in a direction that I was a lot more interested in that, you're setting it up. And like you said, this is a setup movie. So I think your points are well taken. I'm way more interested in seeing Dumbledore and what his story's gonna look like, and seeing just Jude Law get to be sexy motherfucking Dumbledore. Yeah, Yumbledore, absolutely. I think I thought Depp was better than I think you thought he was, especially like that last scene. I think he got to kind of I think show some of that charisma that he used to have and used to put into his performances. I think he had some of that in that final scene. And I also think that I really liked the crew, and I felt very much like I kind of liked being back with these people. And I mean, I always forget the American guy's name in this, and like
Jacob.
Yeah, Jacob is like used as just like a mascot in this in a lot of ways, and just like as like a weird plot device. But I really liked, like seeing Queenie kind of struggle with her things, even though I think some of that was a little bit confusing and not really explained either. And I'm sure it probably will be in the end. But Newt I found to be a lot more likable, and seeing like the creatures was cool. Tina, I mean, girl, you're an oar. If you're really that upset about Newt getting engaged, like send him a letter, do some investigation. Like, you are better than just like listening to these magazine things. Like, things didn't make sense, but I just ended up liking it more, I think, because it's drawing me into things that are nostalgic and things that I am way more interested in than seeing Newt Scamander try to track down creatures.
Right. So you like the movie because you realize that it's just going to set up movies you like more than it. Like,
Yes.
so there's like nothing in the moment that you like though. Like,
well, I mean, there are definitely scenes I liked more. Like you said, all the stuff in Hogwarts I thought was very cool. I thought the scene with Dumbledore and Newt on walking through Paris and going to different parts I liked a lot. There were some really good moments, and what I didn't like about the first one was I just found it to be like just very uninteresting in a lot of ways. And I think this maybe because I don't give as much credence to the creature part of it, even though I do think they did a really good job of it this time, and I found it really enthralling. And I think the CGI in this, and I think they got some nominations for like costume on the last one, probably CGI as well. And this yeah, and this one deserves it as well. I think the costumes, and I think the CGI in this are top notch. If nothing else, those things stand out. So I think that there's a lot more to like, and yeah, I guess maybe I do like it because it's setting up something that I'm way more interested in. But if I can skip over 1 and just start with 2 from now on, I'll probably do that. And if I can skip over 1 and 2 and just start with 3 when it comes up, I'll probably do that, because this is a better movie. But like I said, I really didn't like the first Fantastic Beasts.
Right. Yeah. See, the problem with that is I just think we're just going to get some worse diminishing returns if they stay on this path. But on the other hand, like Queenie is in a much more interesting place as a character by the end of this movie. Right. Being with Grindelwald, her stats as legilimens will probably come into play there. Tina doesn't really do anything in this movie, so she'll probably do more the next one. So that's positive, I guess. Nagini, thankless role, make 3 lines. She'll probably have more to do in the future, right? Dumbledore, not really in the movie. We'll have more later. Cool. So it's just, like I am interested to see what comes next, 2 years from now.
They got to shrink the cast.
Yeah, again, well, that's why I'm glad they changed things, because like if Queenie was still with them, like if it was just the big crew, I just don't understand how you can have them be in the story when you're clearly driving more towards the Grindelwald conflict and his culminating duel with Dumbledore. It feels like you're conflicting with these two narratives. I thought Flamel was pretty wasted, honestly. Like, it was kind of like throwaway fan service. Like, oh, here he is. There's the Sorcerer's Stone in the closet. He's gonna come back later and save everyone. All right, fine, whatever. It's okay.
Yeah, Flamel's interesting because like it did feel very fan servicey, but it also felt like they're setting up this idea that there's these people all over the place who are part of some like larger group that is working to protect things or work together, like maybe early Order of the Phoenix type things. I thought that book was cool where you see Jessica Jones pop up from Ilvermorny to be like, yo, Nick, you gotta go do something, man. Like, you gotta go. I found that to be pretty cool. You mentioned, it's actually so funny because there's so many different things to talk about. We barely talked about Zoe Kravitz, and we haven't even talked about Kama at all as a character. Like, what the fuck was that?
I think that whole plot line stunk. Like, what was the point? And it's like we have this expository thing in the tomb, right, where they tell us what's really real, what's really correct. And I'm like, when they tell us, I'm like, cool, fine. Why do I care?
Right.
And like, I just felt like that was like Kama's whole presence just felt like such a waste of time, just because like I don't think the payoff mattered. And Lita, like, interesting. I really thought like we see those backstory scenes in Hogwarts, and then her relationship with Theseus I thought was actually pretty warm for what we saw.
Mhm.
And then we find out that this is all because the baby cried too much, and she, as a kid, so she pissed her child self off, and she swapped the babies, and somehow the parents that got the baby swap didn't notice it wasn't their baby, and they all died anyway. It's like,
Yeah.
is that really what we got here? Like that was what our reveal was, all to tell us that Credence, just kidding, Credence, sorry, we can't help you. We don't actually know who you are. And
No, he's
then
Dumbledore's brother.
we get that, and it's like all the hardcore fans are like laying out canonical reasons why this is a terrible choice, which we can slow our roll on that, telling
Mhm.
J.K. Rowling what she can't do, but
Right.
and that's not really where they're coming from. I think just like the spirit of it, where I do think it's a misdirect of sorts, and we can talk about what that could mean.
Mhm.
But having this whole movie lead us to just a misdirect or flat out lie, that's just bad storytelling
Yeah.
and not interesting. And if we find out what happens in 3 and 4, that could make this movie even worse. So I just have so many issues with the narrative.
So it sounds
I
like you
find it.
didn't like the movie very much, Dave.
I mean, the thing is, as I'm watching it, I'm like, this is fine, it's entertaining, but I just felt like the
Payoff.
payoffs at the end just felt fucking flat with me. I started shaking my head when I saw the fire guys. I'm like, all right, never mind. I'm out.
I do want to talk about some of the problems that this story presents to the Potter canon. But first, I just want to shout out. I thought that scene in the beginning, though, I got so confused as to what was happening at points during it. I thought that was pretty cool, like a pretty cool fight scene. Got to see Grindelwald flex a little bit.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, that was
yeah,
cool.
so yeah, they had some cool moments. Also, all the different like ministries and stuff like that, I found really interesting.
Yeah, I think general world building is cool, and that's something
Yeah.
that we've wanted more from this to see. And I thought that was actually something that was kind of disappointing in the first one, because like, oh,
Mhm.
Magic in America, cool. We have no idea what the fuck that's like, right? Harry
Yeah.
Potter takes place in England, and it almost felt like a little underserved despite being in New York City. So like seeing more of these ministry offices and just like understand that the Wizarding World isn't just the few hundred people we came to know through the Harry Potter story is
Right.
cool, and it makes the world feel richer. Um, I just think there's choices again in the way of that. That's all.
Yeah, Rowling does a really good job of world building, but you mentioned before maybe she needs someone to help her out with the script. I think maybe a script doctor to come in and give her some notes might be helpful. I wonder how much she's balancing, like movie executives wanting her to put things in. Like this is where I want to start talking about the canon stuff. McGonagall is like -8 years old in the Harry Potter timeline in this movie, and somehow she's like a 27-year-old at Hogwarts.
And that is one of the things that just doesn't make sense. Like the Dumbledore thing, that's fine
Right.
for a second. Like that's just a choice of new ground that can make sense. But like McGonagall's like time starting in Hogwarts and like even birth year has been established not just by anyone, but by J.K. Rowling herself, who is the arbiter of all of this on Pottermore and on Twitter. So why did she get this wrong? And it's like, as a Star
It's
Wars
got
fan, I'm used to canon being changed. Like this is something
right.
that my formative years used to tick me off, but I came to accept because it wasn't up to me. But J.K.
Mhm.
Rowling is literally the only one making these calls. So what the fuck happened? Like it just seems like you just forgot or chose to say fuck it and retcon. And if you want to retcon, that's fine, but you'll just have to tell everyone in a few months on Twitter that you just retconned it. You know?
Right. It's interesting. I saw one theory that McGonagall was using like what's it called, like a time shifter,
Time
like
turner.
Hermione, yeah, time turner, like Hermione was using. Which if that's the fucking case, that's such a random thing to throw in there and to not
Completely.
explain for a whole fucking movie. Like, especially because it's not like you could have written any professor in there. You could have just said any name.
Could have been McGonagall's mom.
Go with Professor Sheehan. Okay, cool. And then you can write a whole thing about why it's Professor Sheehan and who they are and give them backstory. Like they just put McGonagall in just because they know people fucking love McGonagall. It's like,
Right.
goddamn. All right. So the Elder Wand. I mean, this is probably the part I least care about with all this canon stuff, only because like I understand the importance of it. Um, the wand could have gone back and forth for a number of different reasons. Like, uh, Harry disarms Draco, and that's how he gets the Elder Wand in the last one, because Draco technically disarmed Dumbledore, even though he didn't kill him. Okay,
Right.
like there's
That's
all
why
these
Snape
like
gets
steps
killed
to
because
it.
Voldemort didn't understand wand lore. Yeah,
Exactly.
pretty well established.
Wand lore doesn't really affect me until something like this, where he doesn't have it in the first movie. How the hell does he get in the second movie if Dumbledore has been known to have the Elder Wand? Like, you need to explain these things to like Harry Potter fans, because they understand this wand lore.
Right, and we know Grindelwald starts out with it. Dumbledore will get it. I think the assumption was that, either Grindelwald somehow didn't have it in Times of Fantastic Beasts 1, which doesn't really align with what we thought we knew.
Mm-hmm.
But the more likely scenario would be that Newt and Tina, when they disarmed Colin Farrell, they become the Masters of the Elder Wand. It just doesn't make sense. So the fact that when we see Grindelwald at the beginning of the movie, and it's like he just has the Elder Wand, it just feels like they didn't pay enough
Yada yada
attention to something they used to care to. And also that's despite the fact that they had the Deathly Hallows and Elder Wand heavily in the marketing. So they
Right.
were like, so what was it? Just a show for the hardcore fans? It doesn't work because all the hardcore fans are like, but wait a minute, you skipped all these other things you used to care about,
Mm-hmm.
So that is interesting. I don't really know what the reasoning is behind that. I'm sure we'll get some explanation at some point.
Yeah, and something else that's going to need to be explained. So there's this blood pact, which is why Dumbledore can't move against Grindelwald. Why it has to be you. So this blood pact, right? So it's Harry Potter canon. What Dumbledore and Aberforth both described to Harry was that there was a 3-way duel between Dumbledore, Aberforth, and Grindelwald after Ariana's death.
Yes, or resulting in it, something like that. Yeah.
So was this blood pact made before or after? If it was made before, how the fuck could they duel? Just because Aberforth is there? Like,
oh shit, that's a good
none
question. I mean,
none of this
think of
makes
that
fucking
one.
sense. So they're gonna need to explain that as well.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was thinking Unbreakable Vow would make sense when he can't move against him, right? But I kept thinking, not my idea or anything, but people were like, oh, maybe this duel didn't really happen the way we assume it did. Some magical epic duel, right? Like Rita Skeeter teases.
Yeah,
this,
I was gonna say, what's up, Rita Skeeter?
But when they introduce the Unbreakable Vow in Crimes of Grindelwald, my mind goes, okay, now Dumbledore's going to find a way to break the breakable vow so then he can fight him.
Mm-hmm.
So that just changed my mind on that. That's a good question, though. You're right. Another thing that doesn't make much sense.
No. And then, I mean, lastly, you alluded to this before. You said you don't think we need to give much credence to the Credence backstory that Grindelwald's giving. Tell me why.
Well, the reason all the hardcore fans really up in arms is because if Credence is in fact Aurelius Dumbledore, some sibling of Aberforth and Albus Dumbledore, then that means that Aberforth and Albus never acknowledged his existence when they talked about Ariana and the family to Harry and crew. Both Aberforth did it to all three of them, and of course, more famously, when Dumbledore talked to Harry in the King's Cross chapter, one of the most famous and lauded chapters in Deathly Hallows and in the whole series. And the reason that King's Cross chapter is so important to everyone is because that's where Dumbledore finally is honest and forthcoming with Harry, and it really completes the circle. So the fact that you would change this now that he was in fact still holding something from him, because there's really no explanation if you look back at that text for why he would not mention that. Oh yeah, my other brother, and kind of forgot about him, didn't really know we had him for a while. We don't talk about it. Like, it really takes away from the chapter. Yeah. So obviously it's not going to be just that cut and dry. So it's going to be something else, whether it's a straight up lie or it's really the obscurus he was talking about. Remember, Dumbledore has that dark twin line at the beginning of the movie, which leads me to what I said before, that leading up to a misdirect is just bad and uninteresting storytelling. So while I ultimately do think that obscurus theory everyone's attaching to themselves for the sake of the canon they love, sure, that makes plenty of sense, but I think we'll get some kind of explanation that isn't exactly as Grindelwald just said it. But again, I think the narrative is it's questionable until proven otherwise right now.
Yeah, and I really hope it's that Obscurus theory, because if it's just Grindelwald's lying, damn, like talk about lazy writing. Like you're just like, oh, I'm just gonna lie to end the movie
And here's
drop this
here's the
huge.
thing: it's like Credence actually just being no one. That jives with me. You know why that jives with me? Because that's what they told us Rey was in Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Something that I really liked. A lot of people were very mad about because they wanted it to be, Obi-Wan's son or whatever, right?
Right.
And I think that's cool storytelling, and that works. But now you're gonna straight up tease it one way. Like, imagine if they said, "Rey, you kind of look like old Ben." Just kidding. You're no one. Star Wars didn't do that, at least. So,
Right.
They have a lot of work cut out for them in 3.
Definitely. Sure. So, I mean, I'm excited to see 3 just because they did leave us with so much to talk about in the meantime. Sounds like Dave is kind of out, but I know you're still.
I'm excited to see it. I just think this movie itself does not function.
Well, if you like Harry Potter and for some reason you haven't listened to Binge Mode yet, I think we both highly recommend it. Probably the best Harry Potter podcast out there at the moment. And that's going to do it for us for this week. So we got Little Mix, no bueno. Kirk Knight, pretty good. Oxnard, very good. And then we got Buster Scruggs, pretty good. Widows, very good. And Crimes of Grindelwald, pretty bad.
Shitty.
Pretty bad. Shitty. What do we got next week, Dave?
We'll definitely be talking about Creed 2. Obviously, no need to explain why. Little Drummer Girl, 6-episode AMC miniseries is airing by Wednesday night. It'll all be out in the States. Reviews are good. Michael Shannon, Florence Pugh, Skarsgård. Excited to see that. John Kerr novel. So we'll talk about that. Rona's wrapping up. We haven't talked about that since the first 2 episodes premiered. And then musically, Monday, JID is releasing DiCaprio 2. J. Cole signing. He's really impressed with his dexterous songs recently, so I'm excited to hear that. And then maybe we'll talk about Rita Ora, first album since I think 2012. So that's interesting. And eventually we'll talk about Boy Race, maybe Green Book, something like that, when we get to them. But of course, more things will come up over the holiday. So stay tuned, subscribe.
Hit that subscribe. Just a last thought. You mentioned Skarsgård. I was thinking if they were going to recast Grindelwald, I'd like to see him get that casting.
Honestly, yeah, I think he's actually a much better fit. Both looks like him and is more attractive, more charismatic. Yeah, I think that's actually a great point.
So I hope they do that. Listen to us, please, J.K. Rowling. Also, you can't change that Dumbledore King's Cross conversation. You just can't do it. I'd be out. And I know you really care about my fandom. So anyways, until next week, peace out.